Ladies, let me talk to you for a moment, because sometimes God will put a message in your spirit so heavy, so real, so necessary that you can't ignore it. And today, that message is for the woman who gives, who tries, who loves with everything she's got, yet still wonders, why doesn't he see me the way I deserve to be seen? Have you ever sat in silence next to a man you care about and felt your heart shouting every word you refused to say? Have you ever held your breath hoping he'd finally understand your value without you reminding him? Have you ever prayed, Lord, show me how to be enough without having to beg for it? Let me tell you a story. There was a woman I met after a show, beautiful spirit, powerful heart. She said to me, Steve, I've lost myself trying to get a man to see me. And I told her, baby, that ain't love, that's sacrifice without wisdom. Because here's the truth, a man becomes addicted to a woman, not when she chases, not when she pleads, but when she stands in her silence with confidence, clarity, and self-respect. Silence isn't punishment. Silence isn't withdrawal. Silence is power when you understand how to use it. And today I want to take you on a journey, a deep, soulful walk through 7 silence rules that don't just make a man addicted to you. They bring you back to yourself, your strength, your peace, your worth. But I'm not going to give you a checklist. I'm going to tell you a story built through 7 powerful chapters, each one a lesson that grows out of the last, each one tied to belief, courage, mindset, healing, and action. Let's begin. The silence of self-worth. When you stop explaining yourself, there comes a moment in a woman's life when her spirit just sits her down and whispers, baby, you don't have to justify who you are anymore. And that moment changes everything, because a woman's silence, when it comes from a place of self-worth, becomes one of the most powerful forces a man will ever encounter. This silence isn't cold, it isn't distant, it isn't punishment, it's peace, it's clarity. It's a quiet declaration that says, I know who I am, and I no longer need you to confirm it. And when a woman reaches that level of inner certainty, something remarkable happens. The entire world, including the man in her life, begins to feel the shift. I've seen it so many times. A woman who used to explain everything, her feelings, her intentions, her choices, her heart, suddenly stops talking. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of growth. She used to worry if he misunderstood her. She used to overthink every message she sent. She used to replay every conversation in her mind, trying to figure out what she could have said better to make him get it. But then she evolves. She realizes her value doesn't increase or decrease based on someone else's ability to recognize it. And when that truth settles deep inside her, she no longer tries to convince anyone of her worth. That's the silence of maturity. Now let me paint a picture. Imagine a man who's used to you explaining yourself every time he pulls back, every time he gives mixed signals, every time he disappears and reappears like your life is some kind of emotional waiting room. But one day, he steps back and you don't chase. He goes quiet and you don't panic. He acts unsure and you don't try to reassure him. You simply continue with your life. You continue with your joy. You continue with your purpose. And baby, that silence speaks louder than any speech you could ever give. Because in that silence, he feels something he's never felt before, the weight of his own space. You see, when a woman stops explaining herself, a man is forced to listen in a deeper way. He starts thinking, he starts reflecting, he starts realizing that the energy she once poured into him is now pouring back into herself. And that shift is magnetic. It draws him in, not because she's playing a game, but because she's finally honoring herself. Men feel that. They may not say it, but they feel it down to their bones. A woman who values herself demands, silently, to be valued by others. And here's the emotional truth. Many women don't realize the self-worth is quiet. Insecure people are loud. When you're unsure, you over-explain. You repeat yourself. You defend yourself. You try to prove why you should be chosen. But when you're rooted in who you are, you don't need validation to breathe. Your presence becomes enough. Your energy becomes enough. Your silence becomes enough. And baby, that is when a man starts paying real attention. Not the surface level attention he gives out of convenience, but the deep, intentional attention that comes from a place of respect and desire. A woman who stops explaining herself isn't walking away from love. She's walking toward self-respect. She's walking toward peace. She's walking toward the version of herself she was meant to be before the world told her to shrink. And when she stands in that version, a man can either rise to meet her, or he can watch her ascend without him. That silence divides the boys from the men, the confused from the committed, the temporary from the forever. And let me tell you something, a man becomes addicted to a woman when she knows her worth so deeply that she doesn't have to announce it. She doesn't have to argue it. She doesn't have to scream it. She simply lives it. Her silence becomes her crown. Her peace becomes her presence. Her confidence becomes her conversation. And in that stillness, she becomes unforgettable. The silence of self-worth isn't about withholding love. It's about refusing to abandon yourself. It is the moment a woman stops performing to be chosen and instead chooses herself. And that right there is where her power begins. The silence of patience, letting him feel your absence. There is a kind of silence a woman steps into when she finally understands the difference between waiting and wasting time. It's a silence that doesn't come from fear, confusion, or emotional exhaustion, but from a deep, settled patience that says, if you want to be here, be here. If you don't, that's on you. This silence is powerful because it isn't about proving anything. It isn't about manipulating a man or making him chase out of panic. It's about trusting that what is meant for her will not need to be begged for, explained for, or fought for alone. And when a woman reaches that level of inner calm, something extraordinary happens. A man begins to feel her absence long before she ever physically leaves. Patience is not passive. A lot of people get that wrong. Patience is strength under control. Patience is a refusal to rush what requires clarity. Patience is a woman saying, I'm not going to chase you into loving me right. When a woman becomes patient, she stops overreacting. She stops demanding answers from someone who is still sorting out his own confusion. She stops filling the silence with apologies or explanations. Instead, she gives him space, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. She lets him feel what life is like without her constant reassurance, without her daily presence, without her emotional labor cleaning up the messes he didn't want to confront. And let me tell you something, men feel space. They feel it heavy. At first, they might pretend they don't notice it. They might act like your absence makes no difference. But see, that's just a man trying to protect his pride. Because the truth is, when a woman who genuinely cared suddenly becomes quiet, a man's mind starts working overtime. He goes from taking her emotional availability for granted to realizing how much of his stability depended on her energy. He starts replaying old conversations. He starts remembering little moments she used to provide without thinking. He starts noticing that she isn't reaching out first. She isn't chasing clarity. She isn't anxiously waiting for him to decide. And that silence, that's what wakes him up. Because patience gives him room to feel. A woman doesn't have to slam doors or raise her voice to be heard. Sometimes the most life-changing statement she ever makes is simply stepping back and letting things unfold without forcing the outcome. That silence allows him to confront his own behavior. It forces him to ask himself questions he never asked before. Why isn't she chasing me? Why isn't she trying to fix this? Why does her distance bother me? Do I care more than I admitted? Am I losing someone irreplaceable? And those questions, that reflection, that inner discomfort, that's what creates emotional movement inside a man. Patience also teaches a woman something about herself. It teaches her how strong she is when she doesn't react from impulse. It teaches her how powerful she becomes when she prioritizes peace over urgency. It teaches her that she doesn't need immediate answers to stand firm in her value. When she gets comfortable sitting with uncertainty, she becomes untouchable. A woman who can wait without falling apart, without chasing, without doubting herself, builds a kind of emotional muscle that no one can break. And that strength becomes the very thing a man admires, respects, and eventually desires deeply. See, when a woman is patient, she isn't saying, I'll wait forever. She's saying, I'll give this space to reveal the truth. If the man steps up, the connection becomes stronger because it was rooted in choice, not pressure. If he pulls away, the truth comes out without her having to beg for it. Either way, patience protects her heart. It keeps her from tying herself to someone who doesn't know what he wants. It gives him the room to decide, and it gives her the clarity to walk away if he doesn't. And here's the beautiful part: when a man realizes he misses a woman who didn't chase him, when he feels the silence she created with patience and self-respect, that's when something shifts in him. Not because she manipulated him, but because she allowed him to experience the void she once filled. And baby, that void speaks louder than any argument ever could. In the silence of patience, a woman becomes unforgettable, not because she waited, but because she waited with strength, with grace, with dignity. And that kind of patience makes a man realize that losing her would be a regret he'd carry for the rest of his life. The silence of mystery, the space that makes a man chase. There is a unique kind of silence a woman carries when she finally understands that she does not have to reveal every corner of her heart to be worthy of love. It's a silence filled with depth, confidence, and a quiet sense of intrigue, a mystery that pulls a man forward instead of pushing him away. This silence isn't about hiding who she is. It's about honoring who she is. It's the moment she stops pouring out every detail of her emotions just to be understood, stops giving all her affection just to feel appreciated, stops revealing her entire soul just to be chosen. Instead, she lets the mystery of her presence speak for her. Because the truth is, when a woman stops over-sharing and starts embracing her layers, a man becomes drawn to her in a way he can't fully explain. Mystery isn't manipulation. It's dignity, it's patience. It's the understanding that love doesn't need to be rushed or forced or proven in every moment. A woman who embraces mystery understands that being known is not the same as being exposed. She shares enough for a man to feel connected, but not so much that he feels entitled. She lets him wonder. She lets him discover. She lets him pursue. And that balance, that beautiful, powerful balance, is what a man finds irresistible. You see, some women give too much too soon because they confuse openness with bonding. They think that by revealing every fear, every story, every dream, they'll secure a place in a man's heart. But in reality, mystery is what creates magnetism. Mystery is what awakens a man's curiosity. Mystery is what makes him lean in a little closer, ask deeper questions, invest more effort, and step up with intention. A man values what he works for. When everything is given freely, he may appreciate it, but he doesn't feel compelled to treasure it. But when he has to peel back your layers slowly, respectfully, intentionally, that's when you become unforgettable. Mystery is also about energy. It's about knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to show affection and when to allow space, when to give and when to hold back, not as a strategy, but as a natural expression of a woman who knows her worth. A mysterious woman isn't withholding love. She's simply not overextending herself. She's not auditioning for a role in a man's life. She's not performing to keep his attention. She's letting things unfold at a pace that honors her soul. And that pacing creates desire because men are wired to pursue what captivates them, not what overwhelms them. Imagine this: a man sends a text expecting you to answer instantly like you always do, but this time you're busy living your life. You're not purposely ignoring him. You're just not centering your world around him. He notices the shift. He wonders what you're doing. He starts thinking more about you because you're not immediately accessible. And in that simple shift, mystery begins to build. It's not about making him chase through insecurity. It's about creating space so he can feel the desire to come towards you. Mystery also shows up in the way a woman carries herself. It's in her posture, her poise, her confidence, her subtlety. It's in the way she laughs without explaining the story behind it. It's in the way she smiles like she knows something about life that the world hasn't discovered yet. It's in the way she walks into a room not needing attention, but commanding it effortlessly. A man feels that. He feels her presence more than her words, and he becomes curious about the mind, the heart, and the life behind that presence. And let me tell you something powerful: a woman with mystery never rushes intimacy, emotional or physical. She allows a man to earn deeper access to her. Not because she's playing hard to get, but because she honors her own depth. She knows that her soul is not a place someone casually visits. It's a destination a man must arrive at intentionally. And that intention is what creates real connection. When a woman embraces mystery, she becomes a story he wants to keep reading, not because she's confusing, but because she's compelling. Not because she's distant, but because she's dimensional. Not because she's holding back love, but because she's allowing love to grow naturally instead of forcing it into existence. Mystery is the space where attraction breathes. It's the quiet invitation for a man to explore who you are beyond what you show everyone else. It's the depth that keeps him thinking about you long after the conversation ends. It's the silence that makes him lean closer instead of drift away. And that silence, that graceful, intentional mystery, becomes the very thing that makes him chase you, choose you, and cherish you in ways he never expected. A woman who embraces mystery becomes unforgettable not because she hides, but because she invites discovery. And discovery is what makes a man addicted to the journey of loving her. The silence of standards. When you speak through boundaries, there comes a moment when a woman realizes that her silence can carry more strength than any argument she could ever make. It's the moment she understands that standards don't always need to be defended, explained, or negotiated. They just need to be lived. The silence of standards is one of the most powerful forms of communication a woman can use because it speaks from a place of certainty, self-respect, and emotional discipline. This silence tells a man without a single word, I don't accept less than what aligns with my worth. And that message is louder than shouting, louder than pleading, louder than repeating the same expectations over and over again. When a woman has standards, she stops entertaining behavior that contradicts what she wants. She stops justifying why she deserves consistency. She stops accepting breadcrumbs when she knows she brings a whole table to someone's life. She stops lowering her expectations just to make someone feel comfortable. Her silence becomes a filter, removing anyone who isn't prepared to step up while making room for someone who is. And the moment she embraces that truth, the dynamic changes. It changes inside her, and it changes inside the man who's been taking her presence for granted. A man can ignore your words, but he cannot ignore your silence once it's rooted in standards. When you stop responding to disrespect, he feels it. When you stop showing up for someone who only shows up halfway, he feels it. When you stop explaining why certain behavior hurts you and simply remove yourself from it, he feels it. Silence forces him to face the truth he's been avoiding. If he doesn't rise to the level of your standards, he won't have access to you. That realization shakes something in a man, not because he's afraid of losing attention, but because he's suddenly faced with the reality of losing a woman of substance. Standards communicate value without needing validation. You don't have to announce that you won't tolerate inconsistency. Stopping your participation is enough. You don't have to shout that you deserve effort. Your silence when effort is absent says it for you. You don't have to convince a man to treat you right. Stepping back when he doesn't sends the message loud and clear. And let me tell you something powerful. A man who genuinely cares will pay attention to what your silence teaches him. He will notice the shift. He will adjust his behavior. He will either step up or step aside, but what he won't be able to do is ignore the standard you've set. A woman's standards also teach her something about herself. They teach her that love without respect is not love. They teach her that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. Doors she controls, doors she decides who enters and who stays outside. They teach her that she is not obligated to accept behavior that drains her spirit or diminishes her worth. And most importantly, they teach her that she can love without sacrificing her peace. When a woman finally holds her standards with confidence, she becomes grounded in herself in a way that no relationship can shake. And here's the truth a lot of women don't realize: the moment you stop arguing, you become powerful. Arguing means you still believe he can be convinced. Silence means you've already made your decision. Arguing is trying to change a person. Silence is choosing yourself instead. Arguing is rooted in hope. Silence is rooted in clarity. That clarity is what a man respects. That clarity is what makes him rethink his behavior. That clarity is what separates a woman who tolerates anything from a woman who demands alignment. A man becomes drawn deeply, intensely, to a woman with standards because she holds herself to a level he must rise to meet. She becomes a mirror reflecting who he is and who he must become if he wants to stand next to her. And trust me, a man notices the difference between a woman who accepts anything and a woman who requires effort. The one with standards stands out. She becomes rare. She becomes unforgettable. Not because she's difficult, but because she's disciplined. Not because she's demanding, but because she's discerning. Not because she's cold, but because she values warmth enough not to settle for lukewarm love. The silence of standards is not punishment. It's protection. It protects your heart, your energy, your future, your spirit. It protects the life you're building, the peace you're cultivating, the woman you're becoming. And when a man meets a woman who lives by her standards instead of bending them, he knows he's encountering someone he can't play with, someone he can't manipulate, someone he can't mistreat. If he wants her, he must show up as the best version of himself. And if he doesn't, she doesn't need to scream. She doesn't need to argue. She doesn't need to beg. Her silence will make the decision for her. When a woman stands in her standards, she speaks the language of self-worth so clearly that even her silence is understood. And that silence becomes the very force that draws the right man closer and pushes the wrong one far away.